Coming up tonight on NTV's Grow. Cold. It was a battle of frigid temperatures this last week as farmers and ranchers faced conditions head on. Plans that could impact property taxes. Find out what is being proposed at the state legislature. And corn acres turning into fields of soybeans. See the latest planting projections. But we start with this. Farmers say it's the biggest issue in Nebraska politics, property taxes. Governor Dave Heineman is preparing what he calls a united front of business and farm groups. Those are some of the same folks upset by his last attempt at tax reform. Now the governor has been working closely with those like Farm Bureau, who say property tax relief is the top issue. The governor says his plan would provide hundreds of millions of dollars in tax relief. The clock is definitely ticking, 60 days and counting for the legislature to get its business done for the year. Sarah Kirkley has more on those property tax bills.
Well, it's probably not a surprise to most. Senators say taxes will be a major issue, but whether or not any changes will be made this session is still unknown.
The major focus of this legislative session?
Taxes.
Tax issues.
Taxes will be front and center.
That's the #1 issue.
But the Tax Modernization Committee recommends only minor changes.
I ended up feeling that we weren't that much off base in the tax code that we currently have.
We have consistently stayed within our budget, and I have said so often that if you want to cut taxes, you got to tell us what services you want to cut, because that's what it comes down to.
But two members of that committee didn't sign off on the recommendation. Senators Bo McCoy and Charlie Jansen each introduced their own tax plans this week.
You actually inject $85 million in additional funds into the Property Tax Credit Relief Fund. Farmers and ranchers border to border across Nebraska that really deserve property tax relief in order to stay competitive with our surrounding states.
Of lowering ag valuations down, injecting more money into the property relief tax fund, and lowering the income tax brackets percentage-wise and bracketing them up over the years.
But senators we talked to tell us they're not throwing their support behind any particular bill just yet.
My question first and foremost is going to be, if we're going to do something about taxes, how are we going to pay for it long term? Everybody wants tax cuts, but nobody wants to lose whatever tax exemptions they may have.
Besides those more wide-sweeping proposals, Senator Annette Dubas has a bill that deals with tax exemptions for farm machinery repairs. Again, 60 days to tackle this issue and many more.
Meanwhile, in Washington, we are still waiting for a farm bill. Before the holiday recess, the top negotiators were confident they reached an agreement on most of the big issues in the final bill. They hope to have the framework out this week. The conference committee is expected to meet as soon as a deal is reached to work out the final details before a vote. School lunches have been a controversy ever since changes were made. Now, rules made a year ago that allow more meat and more whole grain in school lunches will become permanent. The rules came in response to complaints from parents that said kids weren't getting enough to eat under guidelines originally intended to combat childhood obesity. The world's largest pork producer makes a big recommendation. Smithfield Foods will ask contract growers to phase out the practice of keeping female hogs in metal crates while pregnant. Smithfield wants to move pregnant sows from gestation crates to group housing by 2022. Smithfield has been under pressure from animal welfare groups who say the crates severely restrict the animal's movement. Smithfield was recently sold to a Chinese company. We sure haven't seen a whole lot in the way of moisture this winter, and while that may be good for some who don't like scooping that snow, it's not necessarily so good for Nebraska farmers. It takes 4 feet of snow to equal 1 inch of water, and seeing that much snow in this area would be unusual for this time of year, so it's normally the months before and after winter that farmers count on most for moisture.
January, February, those are really low precipitation months for us. Most of our rain comes April, May, June, and July. We're probably here in Hastings area would average 4 inches of rain in June and May and June probably. We're probably ½ inch of moisture maybe in most Januaries.
Experts say irrigation done last year should be enough for most irrigating farmers, but for dryland farmers who ended the season in bad shape will most likely see the effects come spring.
The amount of water that's there for the winter wheat would have been whatever we captured, last summer, and that wasn't so good. So yeah, I mean, certainly going into this next spring, we're going to need some rainfall to carry that wheat crop through, and that's going to have to come in March and April and May.
Martin says whatever moisture comes before then, they'll take, but most likely won't have a large effect on the current conditions. An Arctic blast was blamed for closing schools this past week, but farmers had no choice but to go out there and get a job done. That's how the day went for Ben Keep, trying to keep tractors going when wind chills plunged as low as 35 below.
Something always breaks once it gets this cold.
In this case, this old Alice Chalmers used to haul hay to cattle. The diesel engine wouldn't cooperate.
Well, if you're running a pure 50-50 blend, it'll keep running, but I'm not quite running that, and my anti-gel didn't work like it was supposed to this morning.
From Coatesville to Hardington in northeast Nebraska and Ainsworth in the north, ranchers and feedlot operators say it's just another day at the office, keeping cattle fed, but harder yet, keeping them watered.
It's not fun. Luckily, we're hauling water most of the time to one field, and if you go break ice and then start it running and get the cattle to come up, they'll drink once a day and it'll be okay. But otherwise, if you're trying to keep one open for like cattle in a lot, you just have all kinds of trouble.
Ben had to break up 6 inches of ice to get water to his cattle and did so before the sun was up.
Trying to get all the chores done the first time around in case something like this breaks, and I have the rest of the day to fix things.
The ground is dry and cattle have a good coat, so they're tolerating it.
Got most of our cattle where there's a windbreak of some sort this time of year, so if the wind does come and the snow, there's a place to go.
But there's nowhere for Ben to go, with chores to be done and a diesel engine to get running.
Every day is an adventure.
Sub-zero temperatures could threaten winter wheat crops across Nebraska and Kansas with little snow to protect those crops. The Maryland-based commodity risk firm MDA Weather Services says freeze damage is likely to hit 15 to 20% of the plains wheat belts. The crop is especially vulnerable in Nebraska and north central Kansas, where there's been little snow on the ground. Usually a few inches of snow helps protect winter wheat when temps dip as low as -4. Water rates are going up in Hastings, and farmers are asked to do their part at the same time to help protect the water supply. If left untreated, nitrates could reach unsafe levels in just a few years in Hastings. The city is in the beginning stages of a $40 million project. The source is believed to be fertilizer that has been used on area farms. So while Hastings Utilities plans to treat the water, they also hope to address the apparent source.
We're talking to the NRDs to get the maximum information we can, and also to see if we can get some help from them, because it's a major challenge for the community.
Some of the high nitrate water they pump out, they hope to reuse on area farms in the form of irrigation. A top Kansas ag leader says water issues aren't only a problem for the western part of that state. Former Kansas Agriculture Secretary Josh Svati spoke with environmentalists about the depletion of the Ogallala aquifer. Reports say most of the water pumped out of the Ogallala is used as irrigation for corn and soybeans, which of course feed livestock. Kansas ag leaders remind those in eastern Kansas what happens with water in the west affects the livestock industry around Kansas City. When it comes to planting in 2014, we could see a big shift, with farmers planting more soybeans. Farm Future's second survey of planting intentions shows this reaction could be from recent market prices. The survey shows corn seeding down nearly 4% from the total USDA estimate in November. All that ground cut from corn could wind up in soybeans. The survey indicates farmers wanting to plant a record over 82 million acres of beans. That's over 7% higher than USDA projections in November. The USDA will release another planting estimate in March. And when we come back, we visit with the next generation of Nebraska cattlemen and women who say a college education is important on the ranch.